Welcome into this week's edition of the Creighton Basketball Newsletter. I'm Jon Nyatawa with the World-Herald. Got some Jays hoops to talk about today, but before I do, I just want to remind you, if you haven't subscribed yet to our newsletter, please do. Omaha.com/newsletters is what you enter into your browser. You plug that in, scroll down, you'll find the option to subscribe to this newsletter, and it pops in your email every week, and it's pretty cool. So please consider to do that. Tell your friends too. On the Creighton basketball, the Jays suffered a disappointing loss to Seton Hall right after picking up a really impressive win at UConn. So it was a up and down roller coaster week. I feel like we've said that a lot with this team, roller coaster season so far to this point. But let me give you some hope, right? Let me give you some reason for optimism for this group because, I mean, honestly, you really don't have to look too hard to find it because what the Jays did at UConn last week kind of spelled it out there for you. But this is that moment in the season where if Creighton's going to take all of the lessons that it's learned from the setbacks and the triumphs, you know, the good and the bad, and apply it to you know, a stretch of games. This is when the Jays have to sort of take that next step officially. I mean, I feel like this team is a lot of times maybe taking a couple steps forward and 2 steps back, 3 steps forward, 2 steps back, then 1 forward, then 2 back, you know. So it's kind of been stutter stepping as is expected. I mean, when you have a young team and an inexperienced team, because some of these veterans who've played a lot of basketball haven't played a lot of basketball in their specific roles, so everyone's learning on the fly. You know that there's going to be some bumps in the road, and that's one of the things Greg McDermott and the players talked about at the start of the season. They were prepared for this. You don't always see sort of that gradual, even sort of rise, that trajectory just sort of improving without some dips. That's just not how it works in basketball, especially when you consider, you know, you're playing in a really good league where teams are constantly trying to find new ways to make you uncomfortable, you know, exploit your flaws, put you in a bad spot. You know, like, it'd be one thing if you're always playing against teams that you're better than, or if you're playing against the same team. You know, it's easier to sort of measure progress. But when the challenges change on a week-to-week basis, or I guess every 3 days, that impacts that can take away from the learning process a little bit, or just mask it. Like, you're not seeing, well, how much better is this team, or what areas has this team improved, because, you know, you just lost by 19. You're down 23-3 against Seton Hall on the road. So I understand that, but I think that this point, honestly, it's Creighton's opportunity. It's Creighton's chance. It's those guys' chance to prove that they have taken a step, because they're going to play Butler on Tuesday, and then they're going to play 2 games in a row against Georgetown, and then they're going to go to DePaul. And the 2-week stretch finishes with a game against Marquette. So we'll circle that. We'll table it for a second, because those first 4 games before Marquette, to me, are really important, because Creighton's the better team on paper, and just when you watch them, you think, all right, the Jays are a better team than these 4 opponents that they're about to face. If Creighton wants to make an NCAA tournament, these 4 games maybe don't move the meter a ton. They're not going to be lines on the resume that the selection committee looks at and says, oh, you beat Georgetown, you're in. But certainly if there's an L by that game, that'll draw the committee's attention. So you want to take care of business for that sense. But I just think, like, the idea of finding some level of consistency from this team is really important. And it'll be a little bit easier. Don't want to take away anything from these teams, because they're in the Big East, right? And they've got some veterans that are prideful, and they're going to try to play hard. But again, Creighton's a better team. So you go into games where you maybe aren't going to be, you know, your flaws aren't as noticeable or as obvious, because you have the talent advantage, and so it gives Creighton a little bit of breathing room, maybe a little bit more margin for error. And again, it's Creighton's opportunity to prove that, you know, it can take some hits in games, make some adjustments, and still find a way to get that win. And so I think it's 4 games in a row for Creighton to, you know, take some of the take all the lessons that it's learned to this point and apply them to on a game to game basis. Not having the ups and downs. They have to play well. And so, can this team do that? I think they actually can. And I kind of go back to the 2018-19 season when Creighton, again, at that point was a young team that had taken a lot of lumps, lost 4 games in a row, twice in league play, was down to a 4-9 record in Big East action, 13-13 overall. And that team, it clicked. And it happened to coincide with a stretch in the season. Creighton finished the year that year winning 5 in a row in the regular season. It coincided with a stretch of the season where the schedule lightened a little bit. Like Creighton got to play DePaul, and I think Georgetown was in there. They did have a big win against Marquette. That was in that mix too, that 5-game stretch. But it was a moment where that team could finally sort of, while it's competing and battling in games, take a couple hits and pick itself back up and still find a way to win, because the margin for error was a little bit larger than it would be on the road against Seton Hall, or at home against Xavier, or at Villanova. So that I look at that as an example of what is possible. So if the Jays were to get hot and win a few of these games, 4 of them in a row, then all of a sudden that sets the stage for a mammoth opportunity against Marquette in a couple weeks at home. So it's an important stretch. It's a chance for Creighton again to show that it's taken some steps forward. And if the Jays aren't able to prove that, then we may be having a different conversation next week or in 2 weeks about their postseason chances, about how much progress was actually made this year, and where this team can go in March or beyond. So, but this is the chance. If you would have told Greg McDermott, me, a lot of fans, that Creighton would be 13-8, 5-5 in league play, right on the bubble from an NCAA tournament perspective with a brand new roster, I think everyone would have said that's pretty good. You'll take that. But now the Jays have to take that next step and take advantage of the opportunity that's laying out in front of them. So we'll see if they can do it. It starts with Butler, a team that kind of rolled the Jays in the second half in the first matchup in Indianapolis, and then 2 games against Georgetown, which won't be easy just because, well, Georgetown's going to be desperate. The Warriors haven't won a game yet in league play, but also you got a back-to-back. They're going to play twice in 3 days, those 2 teams. So that's going to be challenging. And then at DePaul, a team that Creighton already defeated, but a DePaul team that's kind of maybe finding its groove a little bit, just upset Xavier last week. So those 4 teams are all capable. And I think they're going to see Creighton as an opportunity to get right, or Creighton's an opportunity to change the momentum of their season. So the Jays have to respond well to those challenges. But I think they have the capability to do it. We've seen flashes from this team. Now they got to put it together against this lighter stretch in the schedule. And if they can, then they'll be in a good position for the NCAA tournament. And opportunities to kind of more forcefully pad their resume with road games, a road game at Providence, a road game at St. John's, and then home games against Seton Hall, UConn, and Marquette. That's a tough finish, but if you're in a good position going into that, you might find that maybe those games are a little bit easier to win. So we'll see how the Jays handle it. That's all for now. I really appreciate you watching. Thank you, and we'll see you back here next week.